Hey everybody, happy Thursday and welcome to another Techstrong TV broadcast. Today is Thursday, April 21st. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon and I'm so jazzed to be here to bring you today's episodes. We have a lot of great conversations on today's episode. We get things kicked off with a conversation between Alan and Laurent Tankman, who is the co-founder and CEO of Rezilion. Rezilion recently announced integration with GitLab to actually help organizations reduce their vulnerability backlog and reduce their remediation from months to days while addressing 100% of exploitable risk. It's a bold statement there, but it is a great partnership between Rezilion and GitLab. So Laurent and Alan talk about what it means for the sector and what it means for Rezilion and GitLab. Good stuff. All right, the next thing we have is an episode of Techstrong Women, which is a regular series here on Techstrong TV. I host it along with Tracy Bannon. This is a replay of one of our earlier episodes, and it was so nice we decided to run it twice. This one features Nicole Dove, who is head of security over at Riot Games. And we discuss so many things in our 45-minute conversation, including her non-traditional path into IT and ways in which women kind of unconsciously sabotage themselves, which is something we've all been guilty of. We also talk about the impact of a strong mentor, regardless of gender. And it is a great conversation, as always. A lot of takeaways, especially for women in these conversations. And I hope you enjoy our conversation in that one. After that, we have a double shot of our Something Old segment. Both of these are from the recent Predict 2022 event, happened earlier this year. The first presentation is by Bharat Bhatt, who is the Director of Product Marketing over at Influx Data. Bharat's presentation is titled Tools of the Future for Developers of the Future. So it is a great, really insightful presentation that Bharat has, talking about modern workloads and how organizations need to address the complexities thereof. Good stuff. The second is by Daniel Elkabis, who is the Vulnerability Research Team Leader over at WhiteSource. Daniel's presentation is titled Open Source Risks in 2022, Log4j, Malicious Packages, and Emerging Threats. Obviously, this is very much a cybersecurity-focused presentation, and Daniel talks about basically all of the vulnerabilities and breaches that we've seen thus far in the year and what we can expect coming down the pipe as we get through 2022 and beyond. It's another great presentation. After that, I am back with the headlines, and then I have a great conversation with Andreas Grabner, who is the DevOps activist over at Dynatrace. We discuss the Dynatrace State of Sre report. A lot of really interesting takeaways from this report, including the fact that 85% of organizations that were part of this study said that their ability to scale SRE practices will depend on automation and AI capabilities. Who'da thunk? Good stuff there. It was a great conversation with Andreas, and as I said, this is definitely one report you want to check out, especially if you're in the SRE space or if your organization is adopting more SRE principles and methodology. So good stuff there. After that, I've got the webinars preview, and then I turn things over to Mitch Ashley, and he's got a great conversation with Alex Ryback, who is the Senior Director of Product Management over Revenera. They discuss the Open Chain standard, which is basically ISO/IEC 5230 Open Chain, which is the international standard for open source license compliance. They discuss what that is and also the importance of a software bill of materials and the processes necessary for adopting open chain and open source software compliance. This is a very interesting conversation, and in light of the number of vulnerabilities in the software supply chain over the last year or so that have been unveiled and have done some serious damage, definitely this is a conversation you want to check out. All right, after that, we've got The View with Vizard. And in this one, Mike Vizard is speaking with Thrive CTO Michael Gray, and they talk about the cybersecurity landscape and how it is changing in the wake of the conflict in Ukraine. Definitely another very timely topic, and they bring up a couple things that you might not have thought about, so definitely want to check that conversation out as well. Like I said, this is an action-packed episode, and we've got a lot to bring to you, and we're going to get things kicked off right after these commercial messages.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech Conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
All right, welcome back, everybody. First up, we've got a conversation between Alan and Liran Tankman, who is the co-founder and CEO of Resilient. Resilient recently announced integration with GitLab, and that will help organizations reduce their vulnerability backlog by 70%, the company says, and reduce the remediation time from months to days while addressing 100% of exploitable risk. Definitely sounds like an integration worth having. It's a great conversation as well. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to Techstrong TV interview. I am joined by a first-time guest here on Techstrong TV. His name is Liran Tankman. Liran is the co-founder and CEO of a company called Resilient. They are originally from Beersheba in Israel, which we do a lot of Israeli companies on here, as you know if you watch Techstrong TV. But not many companies from Beersheba, right? This is a little bit outside of that Silicon country, Silicon Nation area in Israel. But Liran is coming to us today from New York. Liran, hey, welcome to Techstrong TV, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
So I gave a little bit of background, but you could do better. Liran, tell us a little maybe about yourself, about Resilient, about Beersheba, whatever you'd want to share with the audience.
Cool. So, yes, my name is Liran Tankman. Resilient is the second company of myself and my co-founder, Shlomi. Our previous one, SciActive, was acquired by PayPal, where we ran cybersecurity, product development, and R&D globally. And really got exposed to the challenges of maintaining security in a very large, very dynamic DevOps production cloud environment. And I will talk in a second about what we do at Resilient, but a lot comes from those things we learned there. As you mentioned, the company is from Beersheba. It's in the south of Israel. It's an up-and-coming tech hub where we've been working for the last 10 years, also in our first company on kind of working with the universities, etc., to foster talent, and most of our employees are from there and people we've worked with over the last 10 years. I'm talking to you from New York as we are expanding our U.S. presence. We have offices in New York, in Chicago, in St. Louis, and this is following a pretty significant A round we had in the summer, led by Guggenheim Partners. Maybe one thing about Resilient. The problem we solve is pretty simple to describe and fairly complex to solve. There is so much code, so many executables, so many binaries, interpreted code. We're in a world where DevOps has enabled so much software being shipped so much faster, and with this code comes so many vulnerabilities. right? And so more innovation is great, more attack surface not so great. And what we're trying to do is we are trying to eliminate automatically as much as we can of this attack surface. So there are many vulnerability scanners out there. There are many companies that are in the business of finding issues. We're in the business of allowing you to quickly, automatically reduce the amount of vulnerabilities you have and basically give security the comfort while giving developers time back, because none of them really want to do security, right? So that's really high level, and I can talk in a second more about kind of the tactics of this and technology and everything, but that's what we're about. We're about reducing your vulnerability backlog automatically.
Absolutely. So I would just take no issue with one thing you said, in that, developers really don't want to do security. They don't want to be security professionals. They don't want to be the security guys. But they do believe in producing quality code. And quality is synonymous with security, right? You can't have insecure code and tell me what high quality it is. If it's insecure code, it's crappy code. And so in that regard, they have pride in their work, right? No one wants to raise their hand and say, I do crappy work, right? But you're right, I don't want to say they don't have the passion, but they don't want to be the security team. They're developers, and that's who they are. Laurent, look, one of the hot topics in this whole, DevSecOps space, as we call it, right, is this, the SBOM, Software Bill of Materials. It got all the way up to the White House. The president talked about it. And really what it is and what makes it really, well, there's a couple things that make it hard today. Number one, as you mentioned, we're shipping so much software, much more than we ever did. And the nature of this software is, 75, 80% of the code within a given application is not original code that was written for that particular app. It's reused components and libraries and artifacts and what have you, and snippets, and so what happens is it's like creating a car, right? Where a car's made up of all of these thousands of parts, some produced by the car manufacturer, some produced by third parties, right? And so it's impossible to, not impossible, but near impossible to keep track of where all these, what version, what model of that part number, what version of this component, where did it come from, what dependencies. So that's problem number one, and that in and of itself is a hard problem. Then we multiply that. Software is being constantly updated today. We're shifting out components like people change underwear, right? So how do I dynamically keep up to date? And then I'll throw a third one at you just to really complicate things. Microservices, right? So instead of having this big monolith of an application where I have all my components and I may have to change the supplier on the back end, but I still need that component. Now my application is all these microservices, and those microservices I'm calling on have dependencies on yet other microservices and other third parties, and it's like, so it's like that commercial, and he told them, and so on and so on and so on and so on. More and more complicated. How do we get our head around this? How do we put our hands around this?
So Alan, you mentioned that developers, they want to have good quality code, just like secure code. Just like they want quality, and you mentioned that security can be synonymous with quality. The thing is that quality is synonymous with automation, right? And if you think about the progress that has been made in the last 1 or 2 decades around the quality, is all about automation, right? We went to automated testing, and I think to borrow that, I think the answer to the SBOM questions that you just asked is also about automation. If you're going to do that manually, right? You're going to get overwhelmed by the complexity. You're going to get overwhelmed by the dynamism of the system. You're going to be just, outpaced by reality. And for that, I think the answer is, how do you put automation across this process? So how do I know that every time a new version is being pushed, I automatically create a bill of materials? How do I know that in production, if something changes because the code updated, or maybe a new vulnerability was discovered, a piece of code I already have there, how do I know to automatically update my SBOM? So how do I have not just an SBOM, but a dynamic and automatically and continuously updating SBOM that is going to do, like, if we expect people to do that, it's going to make everyone miserable and it's not going to work. But if we make it automatically and we weave it natively into your CI/CD processes, if we constantly monitor your production, if it becomes part of your infrastructure and it's done automatically, then it can work. And then it has a pretty great value, right? Because then when you have a new vulnerability coming out, you can just go and query your SBOM to see if you have it there or not, right? So it gives you, there is a reason why the administration is pushing that. It's because it's the one most efficient way to deal with the supply chain threats, right? If you know what you have, if you constantly update it, if you understand what you have, then you can start putting into the indicators of compromise, vulnerability. You can start weaponizing all the good things you have in intelligence and threat intel to help. Now, another piece is context. So yes, automation is, for me, the foundational piece, but then not all software is built equal. Right? You have in fact, what we have seen is that between 80 to 90% of those software components you have mentioned, yes, they're there, but they're not really being used, right? So, you may have pulled it with a dependency from something else, but then in the specific way and configuration your code is running in production, it's not really being executed. And therefore, although it is there, it's probably not the highest priority to address, right? So think about Log4j. I may have, everyone will be looking for Log4j. So first, if you have automation, you don't have to start, scanning your network to understand where Log4j is. You just go to your inventory, to your SBOM, you search for Log4j, and you find it. Great. The next question is, do I need to care about this instance of Log4j? And that's where context, come into play. Is it loaded to memory? Is it exposed to the network? So you want to understand not only what you have, but also how it's being executed, and then you can. Usually what you will see that out of the 1,000 Log4j instances you theoretically need to address, there are 10 you need to start with. And now it's becoming actionable. And then to your last question on microservices, yes, microservices make things more complex. And I think it's not only microservices, I think it's the decoupling of software from infrastructure. We used to have a very tight coupling between a piece of code, a piece of executable, and the virtual machine or the host was running. It was all part of one monolith. But now, honestly, some companies, you release software, you don't even know all the time when you release where it's going to be. You don't know what worker node is going to run. You don't even know if it's going to be on the edge or in the cloud. It can be on-prem. And I think the answer to the complexity, actually, the idea of software bill of material is that you look at the software, right? You need to know what software you have, and everything revolves around that, right? What do I have? Where did it come from? Where is it running right now? What is it doing right now? What are the dependencies? And then you address the complexity of microservices from this SBOM, right? So that's for me the answer. We are in a software-centric world. More and more the infrastructure is being abstracted. So we need to have software-centric security for that.
Absolutely. All right, let's connect the dots now to Resilient. How are you guys helping with that? What is the product like, or the service, or whatever you want to call it?
Sure. So it's pretty simple. We our customers, they get plugins. You get a plugin for your CI/CD pipelines with a partnership with GitLab we've just announced. So GitLab, Jenkins. You have a plugin for your Kubernetes clusters, a daemon set. If you have AWS, you can just grant us credentials, and we're using their existing agents to run our code. So whatever environment you have, on-prem, on cloud, IoT, CI to production, from the host to the application, we give you plugins, take 5 minutes to deploy, and now we have visibility. And with this visibility, we constantly build and maintain this dynamic software bill of materials, right? So at any point of time, our plugins, our instrumenters, they collect what do you have, where did it come from, what was added, what was removed, what is the hash, what is the path, what vulnerabilities, dependency, package mappings, everything. So you can go to our console and say, hey, where do I have Log4j? And immediately you will see across your full stack and across from CI to production, where do you have it? This is step number one, and it's constantly updating. So this is step one. The second thing is that we don't only look at what is there, we also constantly look at what it is doing. For example, is it loading to memory? What functions, what classes are being executed? And we use that to tell you what's important. So again, going back to Log4j, you go to a console, click Log4j, and immediately see where you have it, all the way from CI to production, from your host to your applications, cloud to IoT. Great. The next thing is that we not only look at what is there, we also look at what it is doing. Is it loading to memory? Is it communicating? Is a specific class that has the vulnerability really being executed or called or not? And then what it allows us to do is to focus you on those instances that you have and you need to worry about. Because 90% will never be loaded to memory, so they're not exploitable. Another 5% of those 10% left, right, so half of the 10%, they may be loaded to memory, but the specific class, the vulnerable class, will never be executed. So the next thing we do is that we'll use this dynamic software bill of material to prioritize what vulnerabilities matter, and by doing that, we eliminate around 70 to 85% of your vulnerabilities backlog. So let's say, going a bit broader now, we go to those customers, and if they have a scanner, we plug vulnerabilities from their scanners. If they don't, we'll provide vulnerabilities from ours, and then we basically show them how 85% of those vulnerabilities don't matter. It don't matter, they're a waste of time, and allow them to focus on the 15%. So it means developers can code more. It means security knows that they're not wasting the time they get on 8 things that don't matter, but the 2 things they do, so they get faster to the actual risk. And then the last thing we do is that we also help to remediate. So we not only tell you what you have to fix, but how you fix it, and we aggregate it to a very small number of actions you have to take to be secure. So in one customer, for example, we showed them that out of millions of vulnerabilities they had, a few hundred thousands were exploitable. And then we also showed them that by upgrading 100 packages, they will be getting rid of 80% of those hundreds of thousands, right? So you boil down millions of vulnerabilities to here are the 100 things you need to do, and suddenly it's manageable, right? And that's our value.
Absolutely. Look, I founded a company. We did vulnerability management in 2003. So this bang for the buck remediation, if you will, right?
Exactly.
What one act can I do that'll give me the greatest impact on knocking it down? And then then we were early on in the NAC world. And so the idea of, instead of actually doing a scan on the machines, just look at the registry, for instance, to see what's there and act on that rather than seeing what port is open. I could see what port's open in the registry. Sometimes what's old is new again in security, but except we look at it from a different way. We're looking at it now, not from the post-deployment world and doing a test once in a while, but continuously and automating it, as you say, and that's really the key piece of this. Hey, Laurent, we're about out of time. For people who want to get more information about Resilient, could you spell it for them?
Yes. REZILION.com, resilient.com.
Excellent. Hey, I look forward to meeting you in person. Welcome to New York.
It's my home.
Thank you very much,
You're
Alan.
going to love it. All right.
I am already loving it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right.
Laurent Tankman from Resilient here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, we are back. Next up, we have a repeat of the Techstrong Women Series episode. This one features Nicole Dove speaking to both Tracy Bannon, my co-host, and I. And we have a great conversation. Nicole is the head of security over at Riot Games, and she has a very, very interesting past. And she talks about her non-traditional path into IT, as well as some other things, including the way women can subconsciously sabotage themselves and the importance of mentoring and so many other topics that we delve into during this conversation. Definitely one for the books. Let's go ahead and roll it now. Hey everybody, welcome back to Techstrong TV and welcome to another episode of Techstrong Women, the ongoing series that elevates the conversation about gender equity and parity by celebrating the successes of females in IT and so much more. We have so many great conversations. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, as you probably know, but my co-host is Tracy Bannon with MITRE. Tracy, thank you so much for joining me, as always.
I always get so excited. Thank you very much for allowing me to be a co-host with you.
Oh, listen, we're equals. We are equals. We're not, superior or inferior. And with us today, we have Nicole Dove, who is an amazing female in IT, cybersecurity, and just a rock star in the industry. Nicole, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really thrilled to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. I love anything, effort, or people who celebrate women in tech. So this is like the party to be at. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. All right. Well, hopefully we'll do right by you today. But do want to thank you again for being here. We've got a lot to unpack in today's show. But really, what I want to do is start out by telling us a little bit about what you're doing today, and maybe how you got to be where you are.
Yeah. So I've got like 50 jobs, and it's easy because I love them all. So by day, I'm head of security at Riot Games, which is super exciting. It's a new role for me. So I'm really, really happy to be there. Fantastic team, fantastic products and services. I'm also a visiting lecturer at a local university, Clark Atlanta University. And I also extend my teaching into being a LinkedIn Learning instructor, where I create cybersecurity courses. And then I sit on a couple boards for two tech startups. One is called Wraith Audio, and the other is called CyberSync. So a lot of tech, a lot of learning, a lot of teaching, a lot of people in my world. But I love all of it, and I wouldn't change it for anything.
So how did you find your way, though, to this most recent, right? The head of security. You're one of the few females that I've met so far who are truly head of security. I've got lots of women who are on the rise, and in the security area in particular, it is booming, and that's awesome. It's completely amazing. How did you find your way into that role?
I slipped and fell into tech, and this role was something that I don't know that I expected, but I think that I found myself looking for an opportunity to have impact, right? So my career started, I went to school for accounting and finance. I started my career on Wall Street. It was all I wanted to do. And when I got there, I quickly realized this may not be it, right? So I've got, I don't know if it translates, but I've got purple hair.
Oh, it does. I see it.
Yeah, right? So, back in the day, 20 years ago, it wasn't as accepted as it is now. Or, a young woman of color who looks different, presents, different than the typical Wall Streeter. Maybe to be accepted or to rise through the ranks. But I learned a lot. I learned so much. Got into consulting. I loved solving people's problems, right? I loved working on different engagements with different teams and different clients. And I really, really loved the travel. But again, much of the Big Four consulting culture did mimic Wall Street. So I said, I've got to figure out how to actually make a change, because I began to see how culture impacts business. So I went all the way to a video game company. I worked at Take-Two that owns Rockstar, had a blast, stayed there about 5 years, did some video game voiceover work, got my first promotion. I was like, I found my people. And then I wanted to do something a little different. So I got into audit at a payroll company. And that's where I started to just like explore all types of things. I was on a team. We built, staffed, and managed international work centers in Philippines, Romania, India, Brazil. I got to live in Romania for a little while. That was fascinating. But then I started to see how every single thing I did, whether it be Wall Street and Treasury and video games or payroll or even international operations, tech was the common thread. Right? Like we essentially took 20% of the company's headcount and staffed it overseas, and they were able to be seamless and flawless because of technology. I'm like, there's something with this thing. So I really just took, my expertise from risk and my willingness to learn tech. And that's how I got into cyber. And what I love about this role is, as the company is growing so rapidly, you see what's happening in the industry, ransomware attacks, new technology. I mean, everything is just exponentially changing. What I like is that I get to bring that business background to cyber, to tech, and help people understand that tech is not, it doesn't slow you down. If you position it correctly, it can actually enable innovation and speed and agility and creativity. And that's what I love most. I would have never, ever thought I would work in tech. Like I can barely hook up a printer, but I know risk, right? And I know people. And a lot of tech is people and risk and really just getting the best product and service to the customer. And that's essentially what brought me right here today.
What I love about that story is the fact that you did not swim in your own lane. You're going back and forth. So many people, I think, just kind of create a vision for themselves and they go for it. This is my goal in life is to be a cybersecurity professional. Great. But you've had a lot of so many varied experiences that you've been able to kind of parlay into what you're doing now. And I wonder how did you create the narrative behind that? Because, when you're thinking about a job title or a job description, and you're maybe going for a particular job or something like that, so many women, we've had this discussion before, if they don't check all the boxes, they'll never apply for a particular job. And so, so many times you look at a job description, you're like, I'm just not sure that, people, what my skills are will resonate or will translate very well without me actually having to explain how things go and how they do actually work. So how have you created the narrative around your experience into what you're doing today and how it all fits together?
Yeah. So creating and changing narratives is the story, right? And I think the important part was not allowing these unicorn job descriptions to intimidate me, right? I think a second motivation was seeing men in positions that they didn't qualify for. I'm like, well, you know what? If they could do it, why not? Right. And so, but as a woman, like we think a lot, we're very tactical, right? We think things through. I tried to not think so much about what I couldn't do and thought about what I could do. Right. So I'll look at a job description, everything I have, I'll cross that out. I've got that in the bag. Then I look at the things that I don't have and think through, how can I get these things? Or what in my experience may not be exactly this, but lends another perspective on this that I can bring. And then the last part is I'm a non-traditional technologist. So there's going to be a host of things that I bring that nobody else is going to bring. Right. And that's going to be like the magic potion. So, I often challenge women. One of my mentors said, I don't even read the job description. right? But it takes away that intimidation factor because there's so much of the job that's not on the paper. That's always something I ask in interviews. What do I need to know about this job that I cannot read on this paper? And those are the things that, we need to be prepared for, because it's not so much what you expect to happen. The challenges are always the unexpected. And so just by digging in that tool belt and keeping an inventory for my own self, it helps you have something to pull from when you're changing that story or wanting to change your story and wanting to know what you can leverage to unlock that next level.
Well, you bring up a really good point, a side conversation, which is what has happened with job descriptions. They've become magic unicorn listings. And quite frankly, anybody that I interview, any that I look at, there's never anybody who can check all of the boxes.
Yes.
And it was an important message 20 years ago, but it's an even more important message now. And there's a reverse to that, which is the folks who are putting those things out need to not focus on finding unicorns. You might run across one by accident, or the 4-leaf clover in that one yard that you walked by. But in general, what are those applicable skills? What are the crossovers? And what you had was a lot of crossover skills and a uniqueness that other people didn't bring to the table. That's thought diversity, right? Educational diversity, background diversity, right? That's what has helped to jettison you forward. That's fantastic advice.
Yeah, thank you.
So, I'd be interested when you are going through and working and mentoring with other people and helping them to figure out what they want to do with their career. Are there times where they'll bring a job description and you'll help them to walk through, like, don't look at this or interpret it in that way? Do you help them apply the same skills that you've done for yourself?
Absolutely. So this is an exercise that I've used. So this exercise actually was a big part of me coming into tech, right? I was very intimidated by the job descriptions and technology. And it was only because of amazing mentors who were just like, no, you can do this. Go in the room and sell what you have, right? You can do this. And so it's, things are so much bigger when we don't put them down on paper, right? And so, and I realize that a lot of other professionals feel that same intimidation, whether it's within their own field or going into a new field, especially going into a new field, even more going into tech, right? Because it just seems so huge and big and so much relies on it, right? And so because that exercise was so successful for me, it's something I walk people through when they have something that they want to do, when they have a big role they want to apply for. Like, it's a great way to pressure test it, right? Because now you walk in pretty much knowing what they want and what they expect. And now you have the opportunity to align yourself with that and be honest about what you don't have, right? But what your thought process is to how you will get it. Because nobody knows everything, right?
I'm going to guess there are times where, whether it's you or whether it's somebody that you mentor, goes into this conversation and the interviewers walk away going, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. I hadn't thought about that, right? And so whether they hire you or not, they've learned and gained kind of in this, odd reverse mentoring that happens when you're bringing those new ideas to the table.
Oh, yeah. And I've had some interviews that I've done horribly on, but those were learning experiences too, right?
Yeah. I feel like, with these job descriptions in particular, I think companies do that on purpose so that they can kind of gauge the type of people who do end up applying for those jobs, because those are the ones who are the mavericks, if you will. Those are the ones who really feel as though they can bring as much as possible to the table. And they know that they're not, they don't have 45 years of whatever, but they think that they're qualified for the job, and that alone should get them in the door. But at the end of the day, it's kind of this push and pull between being what people expect you to be and being your authentic self, your true self, what you're capable of doing and who you are at your heart. And that sometimes can be a difficult thing to reconcile being your true authentic self when you know you don't tick all the boxes. And so has that ever been a challenge for you to kind of get beyond just knowing that that maybe who you are is not really everything that this person wants you to be on paper, but you know that you bring so much more to the conversation?
So let's unpack the term like who they want you to be, right?
Yeah.
Because what they really want is somebody who can get the job done, right? We get in our heads like, and I am so guilty. And honestly, Charlene, I'm guilty of this with every single job that I take, even till this day. I don't know why this is a lesson I have to keep learning, but it's like, as soon as I step outside the box and I do something bigger, I'm like, oh crap, they really think I can do this. I'm like, ooh, okay, I got to deliver now. And you get so caught up in that ticking and tying and going back to that profile that sometimes you don't see the forest for the trees. Because when you really take a look, it's like, it's not about knowing those things. It's about it's not even about knowing everything. It's about being relentless about finding the solution, being resourceful about looking for the answer, right? If there's something that you don't know, instead of just going to ask someone, figure out a couple options. Do you know how much I Google like all the time, right? And I felt so bad about that at first, but now that I've been in cyber for a while, I realized there are so many domains. Like I know a little bit about everything, right? But sometimes I need that deep expertise. I'm not expected to be an expert across the board. So I think it's more about taking a step back and understanding what's needed to thrive and be successful in the role, and making sure that I'm checking those boxes as opposed to like a set of technical aptitudes and expertises, because I'm not going to have that. I study all the time now, and it's never going to happen. But it takes some time. And as much as I'm saying this, I'm probably going to be going through this tomorrow anyway. So.
I think that it's common, and I'm finding that at first I thought that it was more women. Sometimes we call it the imposter syndrome, and I used to think maybe it was more with females, but I'm actually realizing that it's not. It's everywhere. It's everybody. However, to your point earlier, I do see a difference with a woman looking at the list and wanting to be a perfectionist and looking to checkmark everything on that list, where sometimes a man goes, I got 3 out of 5. That's good enough. And I think what you're saying is, don't worry about everything that's there. Be close, be energetic, bring your life to it, bring all of your life energy along with you, and see what happens with it. Along that line is the number of changing job requirements where job descriptions, where they no longer are including advanced degrees. I'm seeing a lot in technology where it's like, yeah, we used to want a master's degree in computer science and somebody who is doing postdoctoral. There'd be wonderful educational, academic credentials that they would want. IBM's one of the first ones to say, let's go non-traditional, and they're expanding their workforce in crazy amounts. Do you think that that's helping with some of the other work that you're doing? I really want to hear a little bit about IANS and that kind of mentoring, because you're helping people who are in all kinds of different roles. You're not necessarily mentoring kids at that point. You're out there mentoring the world.
Yeah. So I love this question, because I think, and especially with me now having a foot in the education, the academia world, I'm seeing things shift, right? I love LinkedIn Learning because it saved me so many days, right? Because there can be a project that I need to work on or lead that I might not have in-depth experience in. And I can go and find a course on LinkedIn Learning, and within an hour, right, I've got a foundational understanding of what's happening from a verified expert or professional. And my certificates from Harvard, my double bachelor's from Clark Atlanta didn't create that. Right. It was that 1 hour that I sat and learned. When I think about like different career experiences that I've had, like on-the-job learning is something that I think hasn't been prioritized as much in the past as maybe it is now, right? And I think that's what's beginning to rise. I think education is going to shift. I think on-demand learning and on-the-job experience is going to become much more acknowledged and respected than it has been traditionally. I talk a lot about this. I've got a podcast called Urban Girl Corporate World. You'd be surprised at what I had a CISO who went to school for women's studies. Right? The head of risk and security at TikTok, she went to school for finance. She was a former Wall Streeter too, right? But as leaders, it gives us so many different lenses. And that's what I really love about working with IANS as faculty. So IANS is a service that organizations can subscribe to, and they provide a ton of support in different ways. So they've got forums and conferences and online classes, but they have this service called Ask an Expert. And essentially you can look across any cybersecurity domain. We've got about 85 to 100 faculty, typically CISO or CISO directs. And you can spend an hour on the phone with this professional expert and talk about anything. I have helped CISOs look at their strat plans, develop security awareness programs, help government agencies enhance their third-party risk management programs, right? This is different from, again, they could go on LinkedIn Learning and get that foundational aspect, but they want the experience, right? And I think to your point, Tracy, that's what mentorship is about. Getting the firsthand perspective from somebody with experience, because theory is great, but execution is so much better. And, what I'm able to share is, hey, I've done that before, or, oh, you're thinking about doing this? Well, I did that and it flopped. And here's why. Here's what you need to be mindful of. And that's what I find really, really special about that offering with IANS.
I think you're going to see, to the point you just made, the education system is changing. Higher education. One of my besties is a tenured professor, and we talk about this all the time, how it changed with the GI Bill, how it's changing now. But we are always going to need, especially in STEM, we're always going to need those researchers. We're always going to need the theorists. So the theorists won't go away. Right. But we also don't need everybody to be a theorist. So how do we move towards the type of education that you're talking about, which is relevant to where we are now, based on experience, but relevant to what's happening right now, with those theorists helping us to get smarter and stronger as we go. I think we're going to see a big change in the number of students that are, looking at four-year degrees for different reasons.
I agree. I remember even before, the pandemic, there was a big push to get people doing trades, going back into the trades, because everybody was in college, so nobody could actually unplug a toilet, basically. So, now with the pandemic, we have all these people who have gone on and done a lot of online learning, gotten certifications, and recognizing that I hope I just didn't waste 3 years of college money in, learning something that quite literally the last 6 months or the last 9 months, going online and really hyper-focusing what I'm looking at, what I'm learning about, is helping me in my career more than my 4-year degree ever did. So I agree with you 100% that the education system as we know it is changing. The traditional 4-year degree probably is going to be going away. And between you and me, I hope it happens within the next 6 years, because I'm sitting on a really fat 529 account that I would like to use that money to buy a summer home or something like that.
I don't think it's ever going to go away, but I think we're going to see it return to a more pure sense. We need, now I'm an advocate of the liberal arts programs where, we teach people how to think. I'm also a big advocate of non-traditional education. It can be on the job. It can be through, boot camps that you take. It can be through LinkedIn Learning. We just have to help with the corporate America to think about the diversity of the education itself and to be more accepting of it. That's the pivot point that we're at right now. As I've been in some interviews where people have, where we're interviewing and I've had to kind of mute out and say, guys, they don't have that, but that's okay. Are you not listening to the story? Right? Are you not listening to the story? So now
I agree with that.
Nicole, do you also, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Tracy.
I was going to ask you if you also, you're mentoring adults in a formal setting with IONS. Are you also still mentoring with some of the other outreach groups that you were working with before?
Yeah. So I typically, kind of the first priority for mentorship that I get now are my students, right? Okay. So that go through my lecture series, just because I'm finding quite naturally, you have like that top 20% of your students that really, really like are excellent and really engage the content and then really take it to practice. And a lot of them, because my course is MBA level, a lot of them are, really starting, or management level or supervisory level in their careers. And, bringing in that people aspect is a totally different ball game than just being a tactical executor. I also speak a lot at conferences. My podcast has an online community of about 800 women from all over the world where we talk about, different things about our experiences as women in the workplace. And then, this industry is so small. And we're just circles of people intersecting. And so there's always, different CISOs who are starting mentoring circles and they may want you to meet someone and meet someone else. So a lot of it is very organic, but I am very intentional about connecting with professionals on the rise and like the next generation of professionals, because every single fantastic opportunity I have had, 9 times out of 10 is going to be because of a mentor or somebody who sponsored me or spoke up for me. Mm-hmm. So I feel obligated to pay it forward. There's no possible way.
I agree. I think, where we go in our lives from a career perspective has a lot to do with the influence that other people have on us and as well as the influence that we have on other people. So I would be loath to be able to count on one hand how many experiences or how many opportunities I got by answering an ad in the newspaper or online. The best ones have always been, I know somebody who's looking for this person. I think you'd be perfect for the job. So, and I think again that kind of goes back to that being your authentic self conversation, because these people know who you are. They know what you're capable of doing, and they know what you can bring to an organization. And I think that can only be had by developing these relationships, whether it's with the people you're mentoring or who are mentoring you. Or even just people who you're working with on a day-to-day basis. I always think it's best to bring your authentic self to whatever you do, and that can pay off in spades.
Agree.
Now, Nicole, you do a lot of mentoring, but let me turn the question a little bit. Did you have mentors? Are there people that you're like, it hadn't been for Joe or Sally or Mary or who any stories you can share with us there?
Yes there.
Uh-huh.
Man, there are so many stories I can share. I'm going to share. So I was at a tech conference once, and there, even now, but even more so years ago, there are very few women, right, in attendance. And so I am a complete introvert. And so after I engage with people, lots and lots of people, I need to take a break and just kind of like replenish. So if you're at a tech conference, the best place to take a break as a woman is the women's lounge, because nobody else is going to be in there. So I'm at the women's lounge, and I'll never forget this, in the St. Regis in Atlanta, and I'm just hanging out, being an introvert on my phone. And in walks a woman who was on the stage earlier. And I had really admired what she spoke about. And I had said to myself, I'm going to reach out. I'm going to talk to her before the day is over. But again, I'm in like relaxed introvert mode. I'm like, we're in the restroom. That's so weird. I'm not going to talk to her. And I just kind of left it alone. And she came back and she was like, oh my God, you're an introvert too. I'm like, yes, my people. And so we just started talking, and I mentioned some things that she had spoke about earlier. And she was just like, oh my goodness, we just have to stay connected. And we have. she has been so instrumental to my growth in the industry, right? I ended up changing jobs sometime after she helped me think through, which options to take, which aligned and why, right? The industry is small. I know this leader. I know that person. Oh, you need to meet such and such, right? Like if I really trace it back, my opportunity at Riot kind of goes back to her and some folks that she connected me with some time ago. And her name's Olivia Rose. She's a CISO at Amplitude. She is just phenomenal and fantastic. And I strive and hope to be half of what she was to me, to many others, because literally mentors have changed my life. Another one is Trina Ford, who's the CISO at AEG. When I was first thinking about coming into tech, she was the chief business security officer at my then company. And I reached out to her and I was like, I'm not sure, but I'm really interested. And she was like, I think you would be good. You should interview, right? Just getting that nod of approval or getting that push, it makes so much of a difference. And I these are women that I call on often for advice, for perspective. And they're just fabulous. And I only can imagine what challenges they had to overcome to get where they are, right? And so I'm really grateful to have amazing women like that in my space, in my circle.
And do you have any mentors? Go ahead, Charlene, please.
I was just going to say, it sounds like they were all organic mentoring. They weren't set up. It's just like you click with somebody or you don't. And if you click with somebody, then those are the best relationships to have because you know each other. You know where your strengths and weaknesses are.
Yeah.
Sorry,
a lot
go
of people
ahead.
try to force it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I love the idea of mentoring programs. And I love them when they work, but I really do think that the best mentors are the ones who you actually kind of find on your own, whether intentionally or unintentionally.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, have all of your mentors been women? And the reason I ask that is that when I look back over my career, a lot of my career, I've been the only woman in the room. Mm-hmm. So one of the most impactful mentors to me was a fellow by the name of Scott Barr, and he was the wind beneath my wings. He just said, no, you are this, go and do this. And he would open doors, not literally open the doors. He would open the door of opportunity and say, you need to charge through that. And we would talk it through. And I know that I would not be where I am right now had he not, looked at this person a couple of years younger and said, what are you doing over there being quiet? Get up here at the table.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So they have not all been women. One of my favorite and most impactful mentors was a man, Steve Chiono. I was working in audit and I audited him. And I think he was just really impressed with my preparedness, my executive presence. And he told me, he said, if you ever need anything, let me know. And I was like, okay, I'm going to call you. And I called him, right? And he helped me navigate some of at that point, some of the biggest decisions that I had in my career. And what I loved about Steve is that, first of all, legal is much like cyber or audit. It's a service to the business, right? So he has a perspective of how you have to position your offerings in order to get buy-in, right? How to effectively manage relationships and rapport, which is something that I might not get from another business leader because, right, they are income driving. What I also liked about him, he would always, sometimes, like, I was so young and like so ambitious, and he would just say, Nicole, get out of my office. Like, what are you doing? What are you talking about? Right. And I love the candor because sometimes you need to tell super young, ambitious kids, like, a lot of things are timing, not now. And I can't imagine had I taken some of these opportunities that were just crazy, it would have rerouted my path. But having someone to ground me and tell me when I'm absolutely nuts, but then motivate me and push me. And what I love most, and I say I love most because I love so much about Steve, he never tried to make a decision for me. He helped me think through the consequences and downstream impact of my options. Yeah. And that is a great mentor.
That absolutely is. Don't tell me what to do. I may ask you for a little bit more guidance than what you're giving me right now. I may say, let's role play a little bit, but don't tell me what to do and teach me, help me figure it out. I love it. I love it.
That is great. So you're actually keynoting at RSA this year, right?
Yes, I'm so excited. I am really
Tell us
excited.
about that. How did that come about?
So RSA, I mean, that's like the godfather of the tech conferences. And I remember when I first got in tech, one of my peers had presented at RSA and I was just like, wow, it seems so big, so far, so great. And it's like, I want to do that one day because I really, really love speaking and I love speaking about tech. And I love speaking about being a woman in tech. So when I saw the open call for RSA, I was like, you know what? I'm going to throw my name in the hat. And I did, and it worked. So I'm really excited. I'm going to be on the C-suite track. And I'm going to be talking about how your business information security officers are your cybersecurity secret weapon. It's a new emerging role in the industry, right? Many companies are starting to build this into their teams, their leadership teams. But I don't know that a lot of organizations know how to best leverage them. And so I think by helping them understand how to unlock all of the benefits and juice that come with the BSO, I think it can really help take organizations and their cybersecurity programs to another level.
That is awesome. I wish you the best of luck with that. That's going to be a great discussion. And you know, do you have other folks who are going to be speaking there with you, or are you doing it all by yourself?
So I'm doing a solo presentation by myself. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Hopefully we see you there. I am hoping to make it there. It's hanging in the balance right now, but it would be fun to connect. It would be fun to connect.
Listen, we won't be hard to find. I'll have purple hair. You'll have pink hair. Right?
That's right. I'm all colors and coalitions. We'll be doing it. We will be doing it. So, hey, you know, as we've been talking about mentoring, I mentioned this to Charlene earlier. You know, I try to really tailor where I spend my time, not to be stingy with it, but it's very easy to bleed out by just wanting to be too many things to too many people. I noticed a trend across years that you're not necessarily at the food pantry, but you are, you know, and I don't mean that as a negative. I mean, you're figuring out, how do you get the most bang for the buck? How do you take the things that you're doing during the day? It looks like you're using that as a way to kind of tailor where you're mentoring and how you're leaning in. Is that fair to say? I mean, give some guidance to those listening on how do you figure out where to mentor, where to build community, where to invest your time with the extracurriculars that, you know, that are tangential to career.
Yeah. I think that the first thing is being intentional, right? And being self-aware. It's like, and it starts with your own journey. Everything that I pour into people is motivated by what I wish I knew then, right? Like I strive to be the person that I needed then. And I think that begins to lay the roadmap for the communities you engage in, the perspective that you hope to share, right? And so I think another big thing too is you can't be everything to everybody. Pardon me. So it's about carving out time for that specifically. So for me, I typically will take mentoring calls one day a week and I'll block off, you know, maybe 3 or 4 hours, right? But I also, and maybe it's not necessarily mentoring, because when I say maybe it is. Because I see mentoring as more of like a long-term relationship building, right? Mm-hmm. But sometimes, and I think there has to be a finite amount of that. Because if I'm going to mentor 50 people, I'm going to give them just a tiny bit. I think they deserve more. So I'm more than willing to have a 30-minute conversation, you know, and talk to somebody, you know, go through things and chat through things and pressure test things and brainstorm. right? But there's going to be a reduced few that I really am going to connect with and carry through that process. I remember I had a mentor once and she said, I do this for 1 year. And I was like, you know what? I love that, because it's like we've got stuff to accomplish. We set goals up front, we check in, and we make sure that we're on the right path. And if we're not seeing results, we change courses. But again, I think it's all about carving out time, being intentional, being selective, both the mentor and the mentee, understanding what it is that you have to offer and what that's anchored in and rooted in, and just finding your people. And some of it is trial and error, right? You don't get it right every time, but you've just got to start somewhere and it will all.
Well, you've mentioned that there were some very intentional mentoring relationships where you have goals that are set. And so it's more formal. But there's also another side of it that you hit on, which is there are accidental or unintentional or casual mentoring that happens. Both are really valuable. I do have women that reach out who want soundbite guidance, which eventually turns into a little bit more. But you're right. You kind of have to limit that, because that seagull opinions that are provided without getting to understand them and know the context of their life force, right? What's their spark? What's their essence? I can give them some generalities that they might be able to Google, they might be able to find in a book. So the formality, did you find that the formality, making sure that you set goals with a mentor, helped as well?
I think even in the casual mentorships, there's still a little bit of formality in there, because I'm not going to set up time with, somebody that I admire just to shoot the breeze, it doesn't make sense. But there are spaces for that, right? But if I'm going to take an hour or 30 minutes or 45 minutes out of your day, I want to make it worth my while, right? And so I think there's always, we always have things that we're working towards, right? And some of those goals are big, some of those goals are small, all relevant. But I think making sure that when you get access to this person with this knowledge and perspective that you want to pull from, you make the most of that time, because time is the most valuable thing that we have. And, some personalities lean towards, they need that structure, right? Some people for the time, they need that structure. On the other side, some personalities like it a little bit more fluid. And if that's what works, go for it. But I think within both, we've got to be intentional in what we're hoping to gain and what we're hoping to give.
Thank you for that. I learn something every time we have a conversation, every time that we engage in one of these with any of the guests that we've had. Charlene, I think we're running a little bit low on time.
We only have a couple of minutes left. So I want to actually close with one question, and maybe we can just kind of think about it if we can't actually answer it here. But what is the one thing that you wish you had done differently in your career?
Not second guess myself. Just go for it. Worrying is a waste of time. It's a waste of time. Either you win or you learn, right? So, winners never quit and quitters never win. So just keep going. If I would have just kept, I would have probably saved everybody so much time, including myself.
That is great advice. I actually recently read something that somebody said something to the effect of, you can't run the race before it starts. You can't worry about things that you really don't have any control over. So
I love that. I love that. Stop second guessing.
Just live your life, in the best way possible. So I think it's great. Nicole, thank you so much for your time, your expertise, just for being so awesome. We really do appreciate your being on Techstrong Women. It was a great conversation. I sure hope you'll come back and join us again on a future episode.
Absolutely. Thank you, lady. Charlene Tracy, you are amazing. And I love this platform and what you're doing.
Well, thanks, guys.
You.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
CISO Talk. to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
All right, next up, we've got two something old segments, both of them from the Predict 2022 virtual event that happened earlier this year. They're both pretty short, so we thought we'd glom them together into two separate presentations, but lots of takeaways for you. The first one is from Bharat Bach, who is the Director of Product Marketing over at Influx Data. His presentation is titled Tools of the Future for Developers of the Future. It's a great presentation with a lot of really interesting, thought-provoking takeaways. And the second one is by Daniel Elkabis, who is the Vulnerability Research Team Leader over at WhiteSource. Daniel's presentation is titled Open Source Risks in 2022, Log4j Malicious Packages and Emerging Threats. Both of these presentations are worth your time to check out. I'm sure there's at least one or two takeaways in each of them that will help you do your job better. So without further ado, let's go ahead and roll them one right after the other.
Hi, I'm Bharat Bhatt, and I'm the Director of Product Marketing at Influx Data. Thanks for joining our session. Today, I'm going to talk about a new way of thinking about application development that harnesses intelligence from data by relating it to time. We will also go over how this affects various monitoring systems and plays heavily in the increasingly ubiquitous space of consumer and industrial IoT. If you want a deeper dive into the technical architecture of some of the concepts I'll be covering, please make sure to join Michael Hall's spotlight session called Time to Awesome. And please make sure to come to our virtual booth at Predict to get additional resources and technical content. There are many tools out there for developers today. Some of them are pretty straightforward and have clear pragmatic value. Let's say like an IDE like PyCharm or IntelliJ, or a rich text editor like VS Code, or Terraform scripts for deploying your code from dev to staging to prod, or Postman for testing your APIs. I could go on, but as most of you guys know, there's a lot of amazing tools out there now for developers that are easy to grok and relatively easy to set up and deploy. But some of these tools, while essential, can be table stakes now, commodified, and are not a part of how you and your team fundamentally think about improving engineering systems, processes, and the underlying business value of your product. If you think about AI and how implementing AI or ML algorithms could improve your engineering and or business ops processes as a whole, this is the kind of change I'm referring to. Powerful developer tooling that fundamentally and philosophically changes the way you think about designing your product, defining your product value, and most importantly, how it can delight your customers for years to come. I'm not going to talk about the value of AI and ML today, but I brought it up because it shows us how differently we think about tooling for developers. Using GitHub and VS Code extensions all day are quite different types of developer tools than adding AI components in your app by calling cognitive services. And what I want to talk about today is closer to the AI ML paradigm. And this new paradigm I'm talking about comes from the idea that the most important decisions that you have to make in engineering and business are based on how your data relates to time, which translates to having tools that developers can use to handle data specifically in the context of time. We are all trying to build smarter systems that are automated, detect anomalies, and eventually are self-healing. All smarter systems start with better instrumentation and better telemetry. And most of the critical decision-making data in your systems are understood in the context of time. In some cases, they're only able to be understood and used in the context of time. For example, sensors in IoT speak the language of time. They're lingua franca is time. So pressure, volume, temperature, latency, all these measurements only matter in how they change with respect to time. So do many anomaly detection scenarios and monitoring scenarios, monitoring your servers, a segment of your CI/CD processes, failures in authentication or authorization, or even failures in the APIs. There are many data scenarios where time is the most critical element for decision-making, or for triggering off a workflow, for example, when you detect an anomaly in how your app or IoT sensor is behaving. Our ability to ingest, transform, store, and analyze all this data is possible by using time series data platforms as a developer tool. And with this tool, as a developer, you have the ability to improve nearly all the systems you are working on, regardless of what industry or vertical you're in. You can make your systems smarter over time and visualize the analyses to help make you can make these systems smarter over time and visualize the analyses to help make intelligent engineering and business decisions. So how do you do that? It starts with time series data. Weather records, economic indicators such as stock prices, and patient health monitoring such as electrocardiograms, these are all time series data. Logs and traces are also time series data. I mean, essentially, if you think about it, whatever data you're plotting, one of your axes will always be time. And you can think about it as metrics and events. I'll get more into that. Essentially, metrics are measurements gathered at regular time intervals, and events are measurements observed at irregular time intervals. So let's take a look at weather. So weather is a regular time series here, where time is on the x-axis, measuring the weather at specified intervals. In this case, every hour. You can also measure this every minute, every second, and for some industrial IoT and monitoring scenarios, even in nanoseconds. In the stock market example, note time is the axis over which stock price changes are measured. In investing, a time series tracks the movement of data points, such as a stock's price, over a specified period of time, with data points recorded at regular intervals. This can be tracked over the short term, such as a stock's price on the hour over the course of a business day, or in the long term, such as a stock's price at close at the last day of every month over the course of 5 years. Monitoring scenarios such as server monitoring and health monitoring are also regular time series, such as this electrocardiogram. In addition to being captured at regular time intervals, time series data can be captured whenever it happens. So if you think about, regardless of the time interval, such as in logs. As you all know, logs are a registry of events, processes, messages, and communication between apps and the OS. And log data is very important to us as developers, and it provides a contextual source to triage and resolve issues. And this is another application of how you can have different parts that are happening in your logs, and while they're irregular, they occur as events, as irregular time series. This is the same as something like traces, where which are that's the kind of where the subroutines or the function calls that you make as an app goes through its execution, and this is irregular time series, right? So why is this all interesting? Because the important changes in the data, occur with respect to time. And time series is the language in which these changes are communicated to us, whether they occur as metrics or events. And while there's a distinction between regular and irregular time series data, irregular series can be transformed into regular time series with time-based functions performed on them, such as if you use functions that do averages, counts, or sums over certain periods of time for the irregular set. It transforms them. All this leads to the ability to understand the insights provided by data seen through the lens of time. And the utility of this tool is vast. It's really vast. There are developers that are using time series tools to monitor the delivery of payloads into space. They collect and store IoT sensor data from their equipment and satellites. This greatly increases their mission success by ensuring resiliency in critical launch and operational components. Back on Earth, renewable energy is another application where sensors instrument energy usage on electrical grids, and the excess energy is sent over to power solar panels. Urban and vertical farming, you guys have probably seen this, use time series data to ingest and store metrics such as temperature, light, air, moisture from farm sensors to keep the products fresh. These metrics, just as with any of the other sensors, alert them when thresholds are breached. So it behaves only with respect to time, in a sense. It makes sure that things are going smoothly, and then when there's an anomaly, it helps provide an alert, or maybe even triggers off a workflow that self-heals, solves, or gets folks to come in and resolve that kind of critical problem. As you can see with all these examples, I threw in the USS Enterprise there as an additional thing that what is next? What can we do here? What can we build with time series data and sensors and large amounts of data that help us learn more and essentially build smarter systems? We're witnessing the instrumentation of every available surface in the material world: streets, cars, factories, farming, power grids, ice caps, clothing, phones, human bodies, and even, as you can see, satellites and spacecraft. These devices generate more data than we have ever experienced, all in the language of time series. There are many time series data platforms out there that can help you harness the insights data provides in the context of time, so that you as a developer can create engineering and business systems that are intelligent, handle new workloads with resilience, scalability, extensibility, and one day can also be fully automated and self-healing. Please come to our virtual booth for additional content and resources. We have technical papers and links to get you started there. You can always go to www.influxdata.com/cloud to learn more and get a free account. And you can email me too. I'm bbhat or just Bharat at influxdata.com. You can also get a free account to play with, and it's fully with all the features and everything. So hope you really try that out and reach out to us if you have any questions. I hope this session has been useful to you and helps you embark upon or dive deeper into your journey through time and data. Thank you.
In 2021, we witnessed some big headlines in the OSS community. We've undergone one of the most pressing vulnerabilities on the internet since both Heartbleed and Shell Shock. It was Log4j vulnerability, aka Log4Shell. Dependency confusion attack, which revealed a major flaw in NPM, PyPI, and Ruby gems, shook the supply chain discussion even more than before. A critical vulnerability found in Apache Maven affecting over 100,000 libraries. These are just a few of the big events we've experienced this year. However, we are here today to predict what will come in 2022. What 2022 holds for open source security? We'll try to review in the next 15 minutes 3 leading cases. First subject, Log4Shell attacks will be on the rise. Second, we will witness more intricate malicious packages. Lastly, exotic vulnerabilities and new types of vulnerabilities will emerge, which is the most interesting part in my opinion, so stay tuned for that. Log4Shell vulnerability was all over the news last month. We covered in depth all you need to know about it on the webinar produced last month by Techstrong and Whitesource. There I reviewed all the vulnerabilities from end to end together with a demo of 2 POCs. A short reminder to get all of us into context. Log4j is a popular Java-based logging utility. Last month, a critical vulnerability found in it, and because of the extensive usage of Log4j combined with how easy it is to exploit this vulnerability, it made a huge impact on the entire cyberspace. We anticipate that in 2022, many attackers will try to utilize this vulnerability. It will occur everywhere on the web. New POCs will be created, and penetration testing tools will integrate it in numerous attack vectors. It will be distributed via malicious package, and we'll see attempts to exploit this in open source supply chain. Let's review some attacks that we've seen just in the short period this vulnerability exists. You can see the format of the common exploit in the basic payload section on the slide. It is using JNDI feature, usually with LDAP, to pull a remote resource and achieve remote code execution. Attackers already seen trying different things like using RMI to achieve the same impact or using DNS for detecting vulnerable servers. Additionally, attackers are trying to bypass detection by changing the basic format. In the first obfuscated example seen on the slide, attackers trying to obfuscate the exploit string by concatenating portions of it, such as LDAP keyword. They are doing this by using lookups like the lower lookup, which converts the passing argument to lowercase. In the second obfuscated example, we're seeing the usage of the environment lookup functionality. This is done to configure an environment variable of a section within the exploit string. Then, by using a second functionality of this lookup, they are setting a default value for the environment variable using a dash symbol on the same line. Do note, more lookups being utilized like upper and sys lookups. I already mentioned that we can expect Log4Shell exploitation attempts to spread via malicious packages, but we'll see many more evil packages this year. Attackers are focusing efforts on using various package managers, package indexes, or registries like NPM, PyPI, Maven, and RubyGems for their own wicked intents. In this kind of attacks, they are shifting their focus upstream to existing components that then distributed downstream and installed millions of times. Furthermore, attackers release new malicious components and trick users into installing them and using them. The most common method is typo squatting. Although the effort of package managers and maintainers to tackle typo squatting, we will still suffer from it in 2022. What type of malicious package we'll see in 2022? Cryptojacking, data stealing, botnets, fake security research package, and one that is less spoken, which will become more common, is ransomware. Let's quickly overview what each type means. Cryptojacking occurs when attackers take control of a victim's computing resources to secretly mine cryptocurrency for their own benefit. Data stealing refers to a variety of methods that attackers use to steal private data from victims. Cybercriminals steal data to monetize through direct use or via underground distribution. This category includes threats such as keyloggers, screen scrapers, spyware, adware, and backdoors. Botnet refer to a network of computers that are infected with malware, which are being controlled by a single attacker. Security research package exists in some package registries like NPM, which allows package for security research purposes as long as they don't do anything malicious. However, there are people who abuse this and falsely claim their packages for security research. In reality, though, they contain remote code execution, suggesting that the packages were actually built to gain full access into machines in real time. Lastly, ransomware is an ever-evolving form of malware designed to encrypt files on device, rendering any files unusable. Malicious actors then demand ransom in exchange for decryption of the files. According to the estimates, in 2022, the global ransomware damage cost will be higher than $20 billion. We can expect all of these vectors to take place in this year. Let's examine two cases from last year that sadly became extremely common. Starting with an example of typo spotting. An attacker created React1 and Rict1, which try to take advantage of users which inadvertently mistype the name of the popular React package. The attacker used the well-known pre and post install scripts, as shown in the slide. In this code, he tries to add a new user to the operating system and send HTTP requests to webhook site, which then let the attacker know when you downloaded and installed the package and provide to them your IP address. This package looked like test package that the author wanted to use to prove that this vector of attack can be further exploited. We are seeing packages like this almost every day, lots of them using free honeypot sites like Canary tokens or webhook site, as well as other quick wins like straightforward commands such as hostname, whoami, and curl to ifconfig.com. All of this will provide an attacker with our hostname, username, and IP address. Another example is the package H98DX. This package contains a remote shell executable that runs upon install. It tries various ways to establish a connection with a certain IP address, using various Linux-based tools like Netcat, Socket, and by running code in PHP, Perl, and Python. When the infected host establishes a connection with the attacker machine, any shell commands can be transferred and executed on the infected machine. Our team is currently working on a threat report which elaborates more on this subject. Stay tuned or contact me to get more information on this. The most fascinating matter that we'll witness this year are exotic vulnerabilities and new types of vulnerabilities. What do I mean by exotic vulnerabilities? We're all familiar with SQL injection, XSS, and buffer overflow. But what about prototype pollution, HTTP request smuggling, or JNDI injection? These vulnerabilities are much less spoken, and not because they are less severe. It's right that there are fewer places that these kind of issues can arise in compared to the more popular vulnerabilities. Also, those vulnerabilities can be considered somewhat new. For instance, buffer overflow were already been discussed in the late 70s. And official step-by-step exploitation exists since around 1996. SQL injection exploits were first documented in 1998, and XSS found in the wild in around 1999. In contrast, the exotic examples of HTTP request smuggling found in 2005, JNDI injection in 2015, and prototype pollution in 2018. Be sure that we will see in 2022 new finding of exotic vulnerabilities like this. While some of these vulnerabilities like prototype pollution might still be considered as new type of vulnerability, I refer to a new type of vulnerability as something we still haven't seen before. 2021 best example for new vulnerability type is the BD attack, which refers to bidirectional algorithm vulnerability, also known as Trojan source attack. Although some discussed this issue a bit before, it was officially claimed to be a vulnerability only last year. POCs created in multiple programming languages and proven on multiple compilers. The idea behind it is that source code can be maliciously encoded so that it appears different to a compiler and to the human eye. By injecting these BD override characters into comments and strings, an attacker can produce valid source code for which the display order of characters presents logic that diverges from the real logic. Such an attack could be challenging for a human code reviewer to detect. For example, when a developer reviews the code, there might be a commented code section. The developer sees it as a comment and doesn't expect this section to be treated in any other way. But due to an invisible bidirectional character, this commented section is actually treated as part of the code that is being parsed by the compiler, which leads to an arbitrary code execution. This new attack hasn't been exploited in a while yet, but we are expecting to see it in 2022. That is just one example of new vulnerability type that we expect to witness in 2022. there will be more new vulnerability types that will emerge this year. In 2021, we had a new record of new vulnerabilities reported, but that isn't a big surprise. Each year in the last 5 years, the record is getting to a new higher record. We expect that 2022 won't be different, meaning we will have more than 18,000 vulnerability reports. On top of that, as I mentioned in our session, some of those vulnerabilities will be very different from what we are used to, and some will be completely new to us. When we're talking on an average of more than 50 vulnerabilities reported each day, how can anyone handle this amount? To start to filter this, you need to first detect what you hold, gain visibility of what you have in your code base. By doing this, you already filter the majority of the vulnerabilities. Unfortunately, you are probably still left with too many to handle. You need to think how to prioritize. What is more important? What is more critical? What are the things that, although you have in your code base, are ineffective to your situation? There are many solutions that can help you manage this, and it really depends on your needs. Try to think what is the hardest thing for you in the vulnerability management process and get the best solution for your organization. You can use white source to do that or any other tools. There are free open source tools that might be a great fit to your needs. And that brings us to the end. Thank you so much for your interest and attention.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Andy Grabner, who is the DevOps activist over at Dynatrace. Andy, thank you so much for being on the show today. Really do appreciate you joining me.
Yeah, thanks for calling me Andy and not Andreas.
You bet, no problem. I totally understand the whole name thing. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the Dynatrace State of SRE report that you guys recently put out. We keep hearing so much about the site reliability engineer role and its growing importance in IT environments. And this report seems very, very timely. So I want to talk to you about some of the things that you guys saw in the report, but can you give me a little bit of background on it first? Is this the first year that you guys have done this particular report?
Yes, specifically on SRE. It's the first report. We've done reports on DevOps, right? I think we've covered over the last couple of years different aspects of how we as an industry, I think, are getting better in automating the delivery of software, but then also getting better in building resilient systems. And SRE, right, it's not new, as we know, right? Google has been talking about it for a while, but it was about time because we saw a real big increase of demand from our user base on SRE practices, really some guidance. They were seeking guidance from us as a vendor. And then we said, hey, it's about time to really do a survey. And I think we surveyed 450 global SREs practitioners to really get their insights on what are they currently doing, how has their role changed over the years, where they're struggling with. And I think that's it's a great summary in showing what the state really is, and also gave us, and with us that do not only mean Dynatrace, I think as an industry, some good pointers on where we need to get better.
Excellent. So let's talk about some of the results of the report then. What did you guys set out to do? Was it really kind of taking the pulse of the market, or just to gain a better understanding of where SRE fits these days, and the growing acceptance of SREs in organizations? What was your, are you just basically just learning more about it?
Yeah, I think we know where SRE fits. I think what we really wanted to get is more, where's the pain and how can we solve that pain?
Okay.
And the pain is the way I see it, and you can also read it from the report. A big topic from SREs is to keeping systems reliable and stable, right? And we would have assumed by 2020 that a lot of the resiliency has been automated. A lot of the resilience is kind of baked into the architecture. And if systems fail, there's an automated way to recover it. And it seems though that, and I'm just looking here to the left because I have the report open because I don't want to quote any wrong numbers. 67% of SREs say that the largest amount of time that they're doing is still reducing MTTR. So really, and a lot of work has been done manual. Now, why is that? I think the reason is because when SREs start, they try to apply a lot of these practices on existing architecture, on existing software. And it's basically like, and I always like analogies, it's like putting Band-Aids on things just to make it look good, but you're not really solving the root cause. And the root cause is really that we need to architect resilient systems from the beginning. Now, we do see a lot of SREs really getting involved early on in architecture, meaning really becoming mentors to the software architects, to the cloud architects, to the microservice architects, and saying, hey, here are certain things that should be considered in the architecture so that we can, first of all, build systems that are more resilient by default. And I'm not saying 100% resilient by default because I think that's not possible, but more resilient. You can build things into like circuit breakers. You can build in high availability concepts. There's different things how services talk to each other and how they can better deal with resiliency issues. But on the other side, SREs can also impact the way these systems provide ways to get observed, right? Observability is a big topic. How can we find out if a system actually works as expected or doesn't work as expected? And then we want to build stuff into the architecture that then makes it easier for an SREs to actually solve a problem through automation and not just through a Band-Aid. And I think this is the key thing. And I think we see signs that some are moving into the direction, but the majority is not there yet. And so that's a good call to action from our side to educate, to build better tools, but really to educate and enable SREs also to talk with their engineers and their architects to just build better systems that are more resilient by default.
Gotcha. Well, it actually surprises me also that there isn't more automation already built in because, again, we've been banging the drum on automation for a couple of years now. So, but if any area would benefit from automation, I would think that it would definitely be the site reliability engineering space. So do you see that? You said you saw that's kind of changing a little bit, but do you think it's changing as fast as it should be? The market demands?
I don't think so. It's changing as fast, and the very I think obvious thing is SREs don't grow on trees. Again, that's the problem, right? We would need more SREs, and as any other profession in our industry, we need more, and therefore we need to make them more efficient faster, because otherwise, eventually, we will end up with we already have a shortage in good qualified SREs. And it's going to be really tough for those that are currently working as SREs and automation engineers. So yeah, I think we have to be faster because, as I said, they don't just pop up.
Right. Well, it seems to me that site reliability engineers are kind of it's kind of a new role, even though it's not really a new role. It's like a kind of a blending of maybe what used to be IT operations and then some other things kind of added in. So I wonder if it's actually been around long enough that we have kind of a stable of people who would qualify to be an SRE. And, maybe we do, and it's just kind of how they, I don't know, rework their resume or something like that. But I'm not quite sure. But do you think that we're ever going to kind of get to that point where we do have enough SREs, or do you think that we're really just going to have to depend more and more on automation and other technologies to help the existing ranks do their jobs?
No. I'm an optimist by nature, right, so I'm definitely sure that we will get to that stage. And I think this is also because we see big advancements in the new systems that are being built, right? For instance, For me, Kubernetes is also relatively new. I've been working with Kubernetes for the last 3 years, but I know that Kubernetes already brings in a lot of these concepts of resiliency out of the box, but on a layer that is underneath the application. So I think now we see what's possible through built-in automation, because Kubernetes does, for instance, a great job in having automated probes if the pods are healthy, and if not, it recycles them. And I think the same things we just need to learn and adapt to the next layer, which is your service, your code, your applications. And I think just this is what will encourage also more SREs and architects to take these concepts that have proven over the last years to work in platforms like Kubernetes to bring it to the next level. And I'm optimistic that we're getting there, especially because there's a lot of people that are providing a lot of great educational content. And I want to highlight here a lady that I met recently, Nana. She runs Tech World by Nana. She's actually out of Vienna, so close to my home. And also in the pandemic, like I think you started your channel during the pandemic and really grew. And she also has a YouTube channel where she's educating DevOps and SREs on the principles. And I think having people like her and others that are sharing best practices will definitely help making the existing SREs more efficient, but also encourage more people to just look into SRE and into the profession, not being scared of automation, but seeing it as an opportunity.
Excellent. So what else came out of the report that really surprised you? Were there any other statistics that really kind of blew you away?
There's one that I almost take it personal. And it's around the adoption of SLOs, or the ability to define good SLOs. So SLOs are service level objectives. It's kind of like, some organizations call it KPIs, some call it SLAs, so service level agreements. Google defines them as SLO, service level objectives. And what came out of the report is that 99% of SREs said they really have challenges defining SLOs. And I think for me, that was a little bit of a surprise, actually a big surprise, because Google has been advocating for it, and they've shown what they are doing. Netflix, Uber, Facebook, they've all talked about how they are defining SLOs, also at scale, and what are good SLOs. Frameworks have emerged over the years to define SLOs, but it still seems that the tools that organizations use are still not there to make it really efficient to define. And here's the key thing: the right SLOs, because it does nobody good to just define SLOs for the sake of defining SLOs.
Right. Well, you can't have 99.9% uptime and then, not have anything attached to it, right? I mean,
exactly. Yeah. And I think what I've learned, and this is what I think, looking at the report, because I've been fortunate enough to speak at some of the conferences that are focused on SRE practices, on SLOs in particular. What I've learned also in my recent work with some of our customers, you always need to align your SLOs to the top business goals, and which means you actually need to start with the business goal. What is the business goal? The business goal of a bank might be that they are bringing out a new mobile app, mobile banking app, and they want to have a certain adoption of this app by a certain time, and they want to have a certain rating on the App Store, and they want to encourage people to interact with the app to make more transactions, and not only transfer money, but maybe also purchase stocks. So I think there's some top-level business KPIs, adoption, rating, certain transactions, and then you can break it down into what does this mean for the individual development team? What it means, I need to write as a mobile developer an app that doesn't crash all the time on supported devices. It also means for a developer for the backend system that the system needs to be reliable and stable, even under heavy load. When people wake up in the morning and the first thing they do is they want to check how the stocks are doing. So I think it's important to educate people to start with the business objectives, business level objectives. Let's call it like that, for lack of a better word, and then break it down to service level objectives of the individual services that are then supporting that business level objective.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think, we are seeing a trend, so that organizations are really looking at how every part of their business impacts the business objective as a whole. So, taking that to in an IT perspective as well, obviously, is going to help the organization, everybody in the organization, better understand how important their role is and what they do and how it impacts the business at the end of the day. So, value stream management, that's what that one is all about. But back to SREs and actually. That's actually a really good question. SREs and value stream management, do the two ever come together?
They should, because they should and they have to, because again, in the end, right, you're defining certain value streams. You try to make business and you define the value streams, and therefore we all know that the world runs on software. That means you have software that supports these value streams, and so you need to make sure that these value streams are available and they are reliable and they are resilient to certain change, and they provide the capabilities that the value stream defines. So yes, and this is, again, maybe this is a great lesson learned out of this discussion, right? Maybe I should also include value stream analysis more in my talk track and encourage others as well that teach and talk in front of SREs about this. I wonder how much it's in their head, because I would imagine SREs are just highly targeted, focused on just making sure that the systems are up and running and they have everything that they need to be able to work most effectively and to make sure that these systems are working most effectively. So it's an interesting proposition. Yeah, but still, right, to add on to what you just said, that's true. But the role of the, let's say, former IT ops that wanted to make sure that their servers are up and running and you can ping them and that they're not running out of CPU, this has changed. Because as an SRE, it's important that the services that support your business are actually up and running and that they're available and that they can be pinged and they work, right? And I think the ping, what I mentioned earlier, the network ping, so that some machine actually responds, I think is still obviously important and necessary. But what's more important now is that as an SRE, you also advocate and really become an advocate for the business and say, hey, so what are your top 5 business value streams? What are the top 5 features? And then the SRE should ask the question, do we have an SLO for this? Also, do we have a synthetic test for it? I think this is also something that I've learned over the years, especially over the last 2-3 years since I've been involved with SREs. The thing that used to be a ping on the network now becomes the end user validation if your features are still available to the end user, because this is the only thing that really matters in the end. So this is why I see a big emergence again from synthetic tests, also real user monitoring. These are things because in the end, it's the end user, what they see. If they see red, it doesn't matter if everything on your dashboard in the backend is green. They have a problem, even you don't see it. And the reason why you don't see is because you still do these pings and you're not monitoring what the real end user is actually experiencing.
Really, really interesting the way that the role has evolved and kind of become so much more than to your point, just the IT operations folks of days gone by. But it'll be interesting to see if you guys do this report again next year, how things have changed over the last year or so. So I invite you back to have this conversation next year, and we'll take a look at some of the changes that have occurred.
I'll put a reminder in my calendar to ping you on that.
So will I. All right. Well, Andy, thank you so much for taking the time and talking with me today about this. Is the report freely available? If anybody is
you can just either on the website or just take your favorite search engine, Dynatrace State of Sre Report 2022. I'm pretty sure you'll find it.
Awesome. All right. Great. Well, thanks again for your time. Do appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the webinars preview. I got a lot of great webinars coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. So here are 3 that are coming up next week, so you can mark your calendar and join us. The first one is called Mitigate Risks in Code. Protect your software-based supply chain. This one is happening Monday, April 25th at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. This is sponsored by WhiteSource. As new threats in software development arise almost daily, attackers increasingly are targeting the software supply chain. It is imperative to secure each step in your pipeline, which is only as strong as its weakest link. However, securing each step in your software development lifecycle is complex, and if not done correctly, could cause a security incident. Identity and access management is therefore critical to ensure security for human users and other software services. So this webinar covers some best practices for securing your CI/CD pipeline while adhering to the principles of defense in depth, which is layered end-to-end security controls, signing and verification, artifact metadata analysis, and automation. Good stuff. But the second webinar is Ransomware Investigation, the complete demo. This one is happening Tuesday, April 26th at 3 p.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. This is sponsored by Rubrik. This presentation shows how organizations can prepare for a cyber attack and how those preparations can help the organization avoid paying ransom demands. Rubrik Ransomware Investigation will be on display, which is backed with an immutable append-only file system, can pinpoint anomalies, determine an attack's blast radius, and allow an organization to recover from a ransomware attack. The third and final webinar I want to let you know about today is called Show Value Fast, 3 practical ways to get started with Value Stream Management, or VSM. This one is also happening Wednesday, April 27th. This one is at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. This is sponsored by Plutora. The fast evolution of the value stream management market is proof of its ultimate value proposition, which is a holistic view of the entire development value stream from idea to production. Not only does value stream management provide a clear path to accelerating application delivery, but it also identifies the value delivered to the customer and the organization. This webinar offers 3 practical ways to get started with value stream management. These options not only accelerate value delivery to specific groups or teams, but also put organizations on the path to larger opportunities with value stream management without months of internal selling. All right, that's it for the webinars this time around. I'll be back on Monday with a brand new batch for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day, great weekend, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist. We're very pleased to be joined by Alex Ryback, who he is Senior Director with Product Management with Revenera. Hi, Alex.
How you doing? Great. Happy to be here.
Good to have you. Thanks for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and if you would, give us a little bit of background about Revenera.
Sure. So my name is Alex Ryback. As you mentioned, I'm the Senior Director of Product Management. I do focus on software composition analysis, which are a suite of products that help customers identify what is in their application so they can manage various legal and security risks. So I'm sure we'll get into that a little more. My experience with open source dates back to about 2004, so I've been at it quite a while, starting off with a company previous to this employment where I was on the solution engineering team, and often we would start adopting or trying to adopt open source back in 2004. Not a lot of policies back then, not a lot of guidelines, so there's a lot of kind of manual individual component vetting. So that was my initial experience. Then in 2006, I joined a company called Palamita. That was one of the first 2 to market with a product to do this work on behalf of people. And then back in 2016, we're acquired by Flexera, and Revenera is a division of Flexera. So I head up our software composition analysis products. I'm also part of our cybersecurity team internally. and part of our incident response team. And I also head up the efforts to start up an open source program office at Revenera. So basically dealing on all elements of software risk and compliance.
Excellent. It's interesting. I didn't realize that you'd been involved in software, open source software for that long. That was kind of when I started, well, maybe using it a little bit before that, but kind of really understanding and leveraging it more. And those are sort of the Wild West days of software, of open source software. Things have evolved a little bit since then.
Yes, things have gotten easier and harder in many different ways.
Yeah, we aren't just talking about the GPL, which version 2 or 3, which one are we, right? Which seemed to be one of the hot debates at the time.
That's right.
Well, very cool. We want to talk about you announcing the Open Chain conformance that Revenera announced just a little bit back here in end of March in 2022. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we're kind of in an interesting place because, number one, we're a software producer, which means that we are involved in the software supply chain. We certainly don't write all of our own software. Most people don't these days. So we're sitting in the middle. We consume software through partner work, through commercial software that we acquire and put into our products, as well as a lot of open source like many others. So we're definitely taking in a lot of third-party software. We're also selling lots of kits and SDKs and parts to customers that then wrap their products around it. So we're sitting right in the middle. And we are both consumers and producers of software. But we're also in this industry of software composition analysis, which means that we sell products to help customers deal with software supply chain risk. So we have kind of a twofold benefit, which is one of the drivers for the open chain conformance. So one is just to get better at being a software producer, having more transparency, having an ability for our customers to trust us more because we have an open chain conformant process. We're not kind of making it up from scratch. It's based on the specification, based on industry best practices. But also being in the business, there's a benefit to us kind of, drinking our own champagne or eating our own dog food or however you want to call it, but kind of not just selling this, but actually doing it ourselves. And this was an initiative that we started a little over a year ago. And the initiative was to set up an open source program office with kind of an outcome of becoming open chain conformant. And, we'll talk about open chain in a moment, but the reason we chose to do that is open chain does not really talk about how to do things. It talks about what you need to have in the program. And it leaves a lot of leeway to people either adopting existing programs or if they're starting from scratch, setting one up that addresses best practices, but gives them lots of flexibility into what elements they do, don't do, and how they go about doing them. So we figured as we're setting up the open source program office, becoming open chain conformant, along with using our own products to do it, will give us a good framework and something that we can help our customers achieve as well.
Well, we definitely need to dive into then open chain, talk a little bit about it as an ISO, right? ISO IEC standard, correct?
Yep. So it's the international standard for open source license compliance. It essentially is a comprehensive framework to ensure that whatever you are doing with open source can be trusted by consumers of your software, which means there's policy, there's training, there's people, there's process. There's roles, responsibilities, accountability, things are documented. You've determined what compliance artifacts you're going to provide and you're going to put together. It's consistent and there's community engagement, right? And it's certainly not a one and done. It is a program, it's a process, it's continuous. You're always going to get better at it, hopefully. To us, like the very first part of it was announcing conformance, but our roadmap dates many, many years in the future where we want more automation and more push button and more involvement, more engagement. So this is the beginning of a long journey.
It seems like, tell me if I'm correct in understanding open chain, it seems like a standard that, obviously standards are in one way is an interoperability kind of standard. There's other standards for conformance if you meet a certain set of requirements. Is open chain the type of standard where it really matters when the people that are part of your supply chain are also open chain compliant as well? It's not just about you, but also kind of the partner ecosystem of the sources of all the open source projects that you're using, and also commercial software and also software you create. Is it part of getting all of those elements together and being open chain compliant?
I mean, ultimately, yes, right? It's kind of, your typical chain link example, right? You got a weak link in the chain and the whole thing kind of falls apart. So Ideally, yes. You want the entire supply chain to be consistent, use common tooling, use common standards, common policies. But in reality, the supply chain has got a lot of layers, lots of partners, lots of, very robust ecosystems. So the likelihood of it being perfectly homogeneous is almost none, right? So this is where things like OpenChain and SPDX and CycloneDX are really useful, because it doesn't really matter how you do it, what tools you use, as long as you have common syntax, as long as you have common structures, common principles, regardless of which tooling you use or what specific process you've set up, as long as it hits the right points of quality and trustworthiness, it should be fine, right? The system should operate well. But certainly you're going to do bits and pieces. There will be some vendors that are later to adopt, some earlier to adopt. But yes, the goal is to get everybody kind of playing by the same rules and putting same level of due diligence into the process.
Okay, cool. Great. We'll talk a little bit about then what does it take? You talked about setting up, open source compliance and kind of program office or processes and programs around that. What does it take in your organization to really be set up to adopt this?
Yeah, it's in principle, if you look at what does it takes filling out a questionnaire honestly and being able to honestly say yes to all the questions. That's literally all it takes. But being able to respond with a truthful yes takes a lot of work. So I would say there's really two approaches. One is kind of a top down, right? Somebody says, hey, here's some money. Go build a team and we want this outcome in X number of months, quarters, whatever. Or it's more of an organic process. For us, it was more of an organic process, kind of bottom up, right? We saw a need. We saw that our customers had questions that we couldn't answer about, what do you do in this situation? How do you make things consistent? How do you interoperate with your vendors? So we saw an opportunity, number one, for us to get better, and number two, for us to become more proficient to help our customers achieve the same thing. So I think typically the first step is kind of assessing what you have today. Very rarely are you doing open chain conformance with nothing in place, right? You're going to have a bunch of teams kind of doing something, right? They may use a bunch of different scanners. They may have completely different level of risk that they're mitigating, but someone's doing something at your company. So understand that. Become friends with legal, become friends with security, become friends with engineering leadership, and try to understand who's doing what. In our case, we build a tool for this. So in our situation, it was a little bit easier because everybody uses our product in-house. So it's a little more consistent, but that doesn't mean that we don't have teams that do other things. And the point of this program is bring everything together, single report, single view. So a lot of it is coordination, right? Getting buy-in from people to participate. You're going to ask for some people's time, right? This doesn't happen with no effort. You're trying to become introduce the least amount of impediments to engineering. So you don't want to derail developers and take them off their job, right? So you're trying to introduce the least amount of friction, integrate as much as possible. At the same time, you definitely want to make sure that you pick people that, number one, either have an interest, or number two, are well suited with their skill set to help out. So you don't want to run this by yourself, right? You certainly want to build a team. You want to get representation from product management because this is going to interrupt roadmaps. Right? You want to get representation from engineering because this will change what they have to do and how much they have to do. And you definitely don't want to boil the ocean, so phase it out. And you need buy-in from leadership because the way that you track success, the way that your customers will start demanding reports and data of you and how you're going to deliver it will impact everything throughout the company. So you need to get buy-in, you need to get support, you need to kind of get enthusiasm and passion and really understand what you get out of doing it. And then it's really kind of wrangling cats and figuring out who's doing what where, trying to make things more consistent, lots of documentation, lots of write-up, lots of training. Right? You don't want to go to a team and say, we're now going to do this, but you don't know what an open source license is, right? So there's got to be some fundamental training. Linux Foundation has lots of great free training classes. There's lots of open source training available out there, but you need to have general awareness of the topic. So you need to understand open source licensing. You need to understand what a security vulnerability is. You need to understand the difference between open source, closed source, third-party content, just to have an idea of what context you're operating in, because the way you do things will be different. You don't need to be a specialist in any of those things, right? It's things that all developers should know and pick up along the way, because lots of it wasn't taught back when they were in school. So this is another great opportunity to kind of slide in some training as part of the program and make sure that you kind of up-level the whole team just with their overall level of awareness. But lots of documentation, anything you can't answer yes to, figure out how to get to a yes. The questionnaire is fairly comprehensive, but again, it's very kind of loose and open-ended. So you can get to a yes many different ways. You need to have a base program in place, and it will evolve and get better over time. So that's kind of the process we followed as a bottom-up kind of grassroots effort. Got lots of buy-in from a lot of different people that are interested in it. Had lots of help along the way from various teams. And ultimately, we're able to not just kind of answer yes, no, but everything was yes. And by the way, here's our future plans to make this a more concrete yes and get better over time. So it definitely comes with a very long roadmap of how to improve and get better.
So besides compliance and being able to say, we're open chain compliant, what are some of the internal benefits to an organization of taking this on and adopting it?
Yeah. So, first of all, just having kind of a top-down strategy, right? If you look at most companies, there's lots of different engineering teams. They're geographically dispersed. Lots of them probably came in through acquisitions. So there's never been kind of a top-down coordination of we're going to do everything this way. So this is an opportunity to kind of, take stock of who's doing what, try to get common processes in place, common tooling, common level of quality. Understanding where your risks are, right? You're not going to have every product in your portfolio have the same amount of risk. You're not going to need the same level of depth in your bill of material, right? So we'll talk about that in a moment. But you definitely want to be able to coordinate and make things consistent. We've chosen a multi-phase approach, right? Other companies kind of do a big bang single phase. We realize that if we're going to try to get this perfect, we'll never get it done. So our goal was, let's go very broad, let's go fairly shallow on the first pass, and let's improve. And we're now kind of on the second level, or we're now starting to improve more, which means that we chose accuracy over completeness to begin with, right? That doesn't mean that internally we don't have full inventory of everything we use. It just means that we're not in a position yet where we can publish every single bit automatically, right? There needs to be some manual processes in place, needs to be some quality checks along the way. So that was the one benefit, right? The other benefit, again, being in the SCA industry, was that this just provides more trust and transparency in what we do, right? We're not just selling the product and the process, we're using it internally, we're working out, the bugs and the process speed bumps and making it easier for our customers to consume our product and the processes that we deploy. There's also certainly a benefit of being a more trustworthy vendor, right? There's a benefit of being more engaged with the community because all of these standards didn't come from one person. There's lots of companies involved. There's lots of position papers written. So this was kind of an attempt to get industry best practices written down with lots of reviews and feedback, and something that should be adoptable by any size organization, regardless of how much time and money you have to spend on it. So those are the three main ones. Certainly, it helps with sales, obviously helps with marketing, helps us really engage with prospects better because we understand the challenges that they're going through because, we went through them by going through the process. So it just, I think overall makes us a better partner for our customers and prospects because we've been through the process ourselves and understood what the challenges are and what you have to go through.
Well, and just referencing kind of back to how long you've been doing open source software, I can remember at the time then it was complex enough just to make sure what open source or what libraries we might be using and what license go with that, whether it's open source or not. And you're thinking over that period of time, how complex and how many more components we use today in the software. It truly isn't a manual process. You need software decomposition analysis. You need a way of tracking this and a way of reporting and maintaining compliance.
Absolutely. So when I started at Palameda in 2006, for us, a large code base was about 10 megs. And we were fearful whether our scanner could make it through. And our essentially what is now known as a software bill of material, back then it was kind of a list of components, was maybe 20, 30, and that was huge, right? Today, typically we see about 2,400 items. And those are for products that have package management technology, meaning the build is deterministically told to go grab the specific version of this component from a specific place. If you go back to kind of when I started, there were no package managers. The build went all over the place. There was this mythical Z drive at every company, and things would just kind of auto-magically come in as part of the build, and nobody knew where they came from. Everybody was afraid to break the build, so nothing was ever removed. And it was kind of, it was a hodgepodge of things. Some were used, some weren't. Today, things have gotten easier in a sense that things are much better organized. and much more frequently updated. So if you have a problem, chances are it's been patched or there's a patch coming. But yes, the volume is insane. It increases every year. Last year, we saw about a 15% growth on the number of components we see in a typical bill of material. And year over year, it just keeps growing, right? So we're, like I said, up to about 2,400 or so on average that we see in a typical audit, where we have had customers that have had over 40,000 items in a single product. As you know, most products today aren't monoliths. There's lots of modules, there's lots of pieces being pulled in, lots of reuse. So products become very complex, lots of different mix of languages and technologies. Move to cloud certainly has increased the number of components that are coming in, lots of node modules being used. Those are typically smaller packages with lots of dependencies. So you definitely need a system in place for source of truth. You need discovery tools to be able to find these things, because interviewing developers and tracking this in Excel is certainly not going to work anymore. But you also need to understand how much risk you have, right? Is package level discovery enough? Do you need to look at fragments of code? Do you need to look at assets that are non-software, images, icons, documents, everything else that we look for? So these are all the things that we offer, but certainly, everybody varies on their level of risk, product to product, team to team. So you need to consider all these things when you're setting up a program, because you need to understand where your problems are, where your risk spots are, and how much you're willing to chip away at mitigating those.
Well, and I think that I agree with all of that. Of course, you're the expert of this, but it seems also kind of the business model of your software also makes a difference because of containers and microservices and the way we dynamically build applications. Where those things go, where they arrive, where they live and operate in whatever cloud, multi-cloud, multi-vendor, multi-tenant, you can literally, with feature flags and things like that, be creating applications that from one to one to one look completely different based on the customer or the environment or regulation compliant, any number of variables. So the environment that you're deploying into can be extremely complex, not just the source of it. So the inbound, it's the outbound, to use the open chain language.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd say so we talked about kind of the volume of open source certainly has grown, but also the kind of the perspective of analysis has changed as well, right? So again, when I started, people looked at, the code I did not write that is part of my product, and that was it. So people would analyze their third-party directory, right? Then we got into, well, hold on, maybe you pasted something into your own proprietary code. So then we kind of expanded the analysis envelope to be your entire application. Now, as you mentioned, you need to look at platform, you need to look at where you're deploying, you need to look at third-party containers that are coming in. Perhaps you're consuming them and then building a container of your application on top of them. So you need to look at the entire production environment. Now, we, as many other vendors, we do want to move left, right? We don't want to wait till you get to production to look at these things. So a lot of our products are instrumented as part of build time, as part of code check-in, as part of in-ID as well, right? So the earlier we can find something, certainly the easier it's going to be to fix it. But you definitely need to look at each product, need to understand where are things coming in, where are things going, what happens in the middle to transform them, and make sure that you're accounting for all the risks in your build process, because they're certainly way more complex than they used to be.
So not to jump on headlines, but the Log4j, Shelf4j, things like that. Have those brought a lot more attention for you in terms of your customers or prospects? People saying, "Yeah, I guess I really need something more than what I'm doing now," because it can appear anywhere and everywhere across the whole infrastructure, application infrastructure, software combination of where the elements are and how do I know what's where and under what license, what version, what use, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, there's been several kind of bellwether security events, right? So if we go back to OpenSSL and Heartbleed, right? That was kind of the first marketed vulnerability. People suddenly said, oh, what's going on? I have no way to track it. I don't know what's going on, right? We're still finding vulnerable OpenSSL 7 years later. And then SolarWinds kind of woke up everybody in IT, and that was, late 2020. And the whole point there was, well, hold on, this isn't open source. This is a commercial product. You pay for it. But guess what? There's things inside there, right? Mm-hmm. So even if it wasn't something you kind of used for free and are tracking as part of your open source governance, it was an IT asset that was pervasive. It was in every single data center. And suddenly CISOs woke up and said, well, hold on, we're using this thing, right? Everybody's using this thing. Then, as you mentioned, so Log4j. So Log4j was interesting in a couple of ways. Number one, it was completely ubiquitous, right? It was anyone who developed in Java, and most people have at least Java backends in their products, had the logger in place, right? They were using Log4j. The other thing that made this, it came in on December 9th, it came in late evening, it came in on a Friday, and it was the perfect storm of the worst possible time, the worst possible component in that everyone blindly approved it because it was very innocuous, it was pervasively used, everybody trusted it, it was a nice permissive license, didn't have any bad vulnerabilities, and suddenly it did. So then it became, well, where do we have it? Right. And do we have a program in place? Do we have a bill of material? Do we have something searchable? Do we need to go talk to development teams? Do we have something deployed that we're not even tracking in our IT asset management, right? Because it may not be your product. It may be something in your data center that interfaces with your product that you have no control over. It. You bought it from another vendor. So this became a phishing expedition everywhere, right? There was a full network scan. There were scans of products. There was trying to correlate, well, where do I patch to? Because Apache kept releasing new versions of this every other day. Right. So typically these things have fairly long tails, right? There's going to be continuous patches happening over time as people discover new exploits of the components. So, the thing we saw was certainly created more urgency. The other consequence was it created more perceived risk in general. So I'd be hard pressed to name a customer whose security team didn't tighten up their constraints as a result, even if they weren't affected at all, right? It was, we felt like we're on our heels and we don't want to be there next time. So we're going to put much tighter controls on everything and everything that's coming in. So I think even if people weren't directly impacted by it, all of their customer security teams are going to force them to kind of become more mature in their governance program, which again, circling back to open chain and software bill of material, this is how you do it, right? You become proactive, you catalog, you revise your bill of material early and often, and you have a system you can query when something happens without having to go and scan in a kind of a panicked frenzy when this is going on.
Yeah, it's not the one event corner case. It's the successive of actually. This isn't a corner case, right? This is a core
it's a storm. Many waves of the storm. Yes,
it is, and now it's becoming. I don't know if it isn't yet. It's becoming, essential core to what we do about how we manage the software and think about the security of it. So it's just how rapidly things can change.
Yeah, and I think another consequence of this has been, it's become people's full-time job to just pay attention to the stuff, right? It used to be just another side effect of other things you did, but in many cases, there is no one tool that's going to go sniff your entire network and look at all your products and look at your development environment. So you need to have everything coordinated, everything's hopefully rolling up into some sort of risk dashboard and having people be notified when they have to act. So it's definitely caused a lot of process review and process improvements. Hopefully folks are doing postmortems and retrospectives and kind of learning from what happened in the last two, because there will be many more.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's been great. Well, thank you for helping, obviously it's in the interest of your company, Revenair, what you do, but of course, bringing to light more information about open chain. And we talked a little bit about software bill of materials, but really the whole challenge, because I think we're not only educating ourselves, sometimes we have to educate others in the organization about the importance of this, the impact of it. And when events happen, that can help us, but it also can fuel positive steps to move forward. So it's a great topic, a great conversation.
Yep, absolutely. And I'll kind of leave with a plug. OpenChain's got a survey right now where they get lots of good feedback around open source usage. So I would definitely invite all the listeners to go fill it out on behalf of your organizations. The more data points we get, the better we can advance the cause and make sure the program helps people out.
Great, excellent. If I remember right, OpenChain is hosted by Linux Foundation, right? One of their projects. Excellent. Well, great. Alex, where can people find out more about Revenair, what all you do there?
Yeah, just go to revenair.com if you're interested in SCA, revenair.com/SCA. And, all the wonderful products that we offer are explained there. And, feel free to reach out to me directly with any questions, and you can find me on the website as well.
Great. And I think I stumbled over the name, but it's spelled REVENERA.com.
Correct. Revenair.com. Yep.
Revenair. Get to your site. Alex, thank you. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and I hope you come back and share with us more, because obviously this is an evolving and changing field, maturing, and hopefully we'll make some key advancements here in the next months and in a few years.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Mitch.
You bet. Thank you.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, we are back. Rounding out today's Techstrong TV broadcast, we have The View with Vizard. In this one, Mike Vizard is speaking with Thrive CTO Michael Gray, and they discuss the cybersecurity landscape and how it is changing in the wake of the conflict in Ukraine. We've been hearing about it for weeks and weeks and weeks now, and maybe something big is on the horizon. I hope not, but we all have to be prepared just in case. And this is a great conversation that brings up a lot of really interesting possibilities. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Michael Gray, who's CTO for Thrive. They're a provider of managed services, and we're going to be talking about what's going on with security these days, especially in light of some of the global conflicts out there. Michael, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Thank you so much.
So far, I feel like we've been maybe lucky. A lot of people thought things would be worse at the moment. What's your assessment of the current state of cybersecurity, given all the expectations we thought would happen as a result of the Ukraine conflict? But right now, maybe we're not seeing it, but is there more to come?
Well, I think obviously this is, we're all surprised there wasn't more. Now, I don't think the cyber attacks, have stopped. I just don't know that they've increased the way, that we all thought they would. From some of my research and some of my reading, there's a feeling that there's some distraction, from the Russians. Like, we have to have these people concentrated on, maybe defending Russia's network as opposed to out there, maybe hitting the U.S. With cyber attacks. That, they got to take care of what's at their home front before they can, come at small businesses here in the U.S.
All right. Everybody gives as good as they get. What exactly should those businesses in the U.S. be focused on these days? What's your best advice to them in terms of preparing or maybe even preventing some of these attacks?
Yeah, the number one recommendation that we have and will continue to be for some time is multi-factor. The tools are out there. A lot of time they're included with whatever application, typically Office 365, even a basic MFA is available. But time and time again, the attacks that we're seeing are because you don't have MFA in your Office 365 or on your VPN. And I don't know that it's necessarily just the MFA, but what comes along with it, right? Now we're sort of tracking down who's still an employee. I look at Colonial Pipeline, and as much as that was an attack on a former employee, right? If that was a multi-factor, even though the employee didn't work there anymore, there's a pretty good chance that would have been repelled. So there's some other stuff that I think comes along with MFA, when it comes to managing user validation and things like that, that can be pretty helpful.
We've been talking about MFA for a long time, and now we're talking about zero trust. So what makes MFA hard, and why don't more people do it?
Well, it's the enrollment. And frankly, I do find that, there are users that are not as sophisticated. And I actually don't even tag this necessarily on age when it comes to sophistication, that, well, I don't really need to worry about this security. So this MFA prompt that I get, I'm just going to ignore it. Or, hey, I'm having trouble getting my users to set up the application on the phone. And really, it's not even a technical requirement in my eyes. It's a training requirement. Can you sit your company down for a half hour, 45 minutes, explain why we're turning on MFA, make sure that the leadership is on board with MFA. A lot of the soft skills is what I find that is the key to success when it comes to MFA, not necessarily the technical requirement. As far as zero trust, it's now that ubiquitous term that could mean anything. The way I look at it is just getting clean traffic from workstations, especially with people working from home on laptops and the like, no matter where they're going, even with return to work happening and people going back to conferences. I think we've got probably another year before zero trust. We can define it a little more cleanly across the industry. Obviously, the vendors have hopped right on that latest buzzword, which is zero trust. So there's still a lot of confusion out there. Still a lot of different solutions calling themselves the same thing. But I think in a year's time, it'll make things a little bit more clear. But again, the whole idea is that your traffic's headed out to a data center, being scrubbed inbound and outbound, and then out to the internet.
Do you think a lot of organizations are overconfident in their security capabilities and they think that they're fairly secure when in reality they basically have some AV software and a firewall, right?
Yeah, well, there's a couple pieces to that. Number one, there's a feeling that, well, that's the responsibility of my managed service provider, not me. I'm already paying them X or Y on a monthly basis. They're in charge of my security. I would encourage everyone to really take a hard look at your invoice and your contract and ask the question, do I have the security services available that I could have? Because since security is relatively new, especially when it comes to the MSP industry, a lot of those providers did not include security as part of their initial package. So you may have signed a contract 3 years ago that at the time made a lot of sense, and security was called out maybe in some bullet points towards the bottom of the contract. But security has just evolved massively. Everybody knows that, and things have greatly changed. Right. The other thing I see is that it's never going to happen to me, or I'm not going to spend a lot of money. I'm on security. I'm a small company. What can they really take? Just had a small organization, less than 15 people, who had that exact thinking, who was sent screenshots of their file system and their driver's license. And the hacker said, I can now fully extort you. I have all of your information. This is someone that thought it would never happen to them and decided not to get those security services. And sure enough, it came back to bite them.
Is there something people should be doing in the way of self-assessments, or maybe looking at guys like you to do some sort of assessment for them? And is that something that they even have the expertise to do? So how do I determine what my security posture really is?
Yeah, well, believe it or not, there's probably something that most folks have in front of them and don't even realize it, and that's their insurance application. So obviously, it's my recommendation that you should have cybersecurity insurance. Almost every insurance provider has it available. How you do on their questionnaire is going to tell you a lot about what you have and what you don't have. And I would even take maybe a business person's, a lay person's walk through one of those cybersecurity questionnaires as it pertains to insurance. See if the business leaders can even answer it without their IT person there. That is an easy way to start drumming up the right kinds of conversations about what do we have, what do we not have, what is this? Not everybody can define MFA, believe it or not. Not everybody can define EDR. These are new concepts to even IT folks, never mind, folks who are in the business world outside of technology, right? So that is an easy one. There are plenty of frameworks. Obviously, NIST would come up, but a lot of times I tell people, before you get into a cybersecurity framework, talk to your IT folks, talk to your MSP vendor, ask them where the gaps are. Ask them for some feedback. It doesn't cost you anything. Most people in the cybersecurity industry want to talk about where the weak links are, and they will spend the time going over with you.
Mm-hmm. Do you think also that we're seeing a convergence now of security and things we used to just refer to as data protection because of ransomware attacks? So are people thinking now of data protection and the recovery side of that as an extension of cybersecurity?
Yeah, what I'm seeing now is a full chain all the way across. And NIST is a really good example. The last step in NIST is recover. A lot of times, if you were going to fill out a NIST framework, you would be thinking of different cyber tools, defense tools, detection tools, things like that. And now we're really seeing DR and backup being linked into cybersecurity and sort of the last piece of the chain. And the thinking is, well, if all these things happen, where's my recover? And that's obviously in DR and backup. So I don't know that it's completely made the leap, DR, for example, into these are one of my cyber tools, but it's certainly, starting to become part of the conversation. And of course, data protection is very mature in comparison to cybersecurity defense tools. So they kind of plug in very nicely into these other policies and procedures.
Do you think we're maybe too dependent upon cybersecurity insurance? A lot of people may be thinking that, well, the cost of doing all this security stuff is high and the insurance policy is less, so I'll just go with the insurance and we'll see what happens.
Well, maybe a couple of years ago, I could see those decisions being made. But what we're finding is that the insurance providers have caught up to that. And those days are long since past. And they're not actually covering everything. They're covering some of the basics to restore from the incident, or sort of cursory, some dollars to help with some professional services. But what we find over and over again is anybody that thought that way that has a breach has realized, geez, this costs me way more than actually installing these tools and getting the right insurance and making sure I have everything I need, as opposed to, maybe they gave some amount of money to recover from the attack, but it's not even close to what is needed to get back to business as usual.
It almost seems like there's two types of attacks. Ransomware attacks are a little more targeted, but I think what we're going to be worried about going forward is it's more of the sense of collateral damage. There's going to be attacks aimed at networks and infrastructure that just might accidentally hit somebody because they had the right configuration or they were in their quite literally wrong place at the wrong time. So is that kind of the threat that we're really looking at now as the outcome of these kinds of global conflicts?
Well, some of these fire and forget attacks, which is, I'm just going to go find. Last year, we saw Microsoft Exchange with a huge vulnerability. And the attackers basically said, well, I'll just go find everybody who's vulnerable, and then I'll pick and choose which one I want to dig a layer deeper. Which one can I make the most money off of? Maybe I'll just get my hooks in everywhere I possibly can, and maybe even use some data analytics to tell me which one I can make the most money off of, because, the level of sophistication from a technology standpoint of these hacking groups is pretty amazing. These are very talented people, and whatever they can do to use technology to leverage their abilities, they're going to use it. If you can go find a large set of vulnerable servers and then figure out how they can make money off after the fact, they'll absolutely do that.
Mm-hmm. Do you think maybe one day, speaking of data analytics, that AI might really save us from ourselves, or is AI kind of a lot of wishful thinking at the moment?
I think it's something that can bolster our defenses, but we need to save ourselves. Believe it or not, it does actually come from the humans. Time and time again, we've seen attacks that had the most sophisticated technology, but were slightly misconfigured. The human is always involved. I don't think a full AI stack that is monitoring everything and taking action on the fly, where a human has been removed 100%. I don't think that's realistic. What I do see is, AI or some sort of automation taking away towards 80% of the work, and the human still maybe at the end making a decision or taking in a very quick high-level analysis because everything has been worked out for them as far as the next steps on different attacks go. I think certainly we've made strides, but there's still a ways to go before we can really get to a point like that.
A lot of organizations that I talk to still implement cybersecurity on their own. Have you seen more of a shift to managed services, and what tips people in that direction ultimately? Because it just seems to me less than a quarter of the population is relying on a managed service at the moment. So what will change that equation?
Well, one of the things that's changing that equation just in the last year and maybe a little bit longer is the job market. Cybersecurity positions are in extremely high demand. If you decide to go it on your own with the cybersecurity, build your own team, you may actually get some people in the beginning, but the likelihood that they stay around is pretty low. So that's one of the main things I'm seeing drive people now to outsource solutions. The other thing is the cost involved with all the tooling behind running a security operations center. And at the end of the day, folks finding out that they built their own team and they have their own tools. And while it's operating okay, it's still extremely expensive. So there's a scale problem when it comes to running a SOC. Obviously, I can say personally, I see how this works. If you want to bring in new tools, the investment it takes is significant. So you want to make sure you're getting some leverage, and smaller teams can't do that.
All right. So, Michael, what's the one thing you wish people would do or know before they engaged you? What would make your life easier?
Well, first of all, I want people to realize that, your security is never going to be 100%, right? Even if you buy every tool out there and take every piece of advice, it takes a lot of vigilance. But it really is a start day to day. What can I do today to improve my security? What can I do tomorrow and every day on forward? I think there's an awful lot of desire when people put cybersecurity high on a list. That, well, if I spend enough time on it, it's going to be that I don't have to deal with it anymore. The fact of the matter is it's something that needs to be worked on a very regular basis. The threats are evolving on a daily basis. So it's not just a conversation that takes place once a quarter. It's really a constant evolution of how are you protecting yourself from the attacks that are out there.
Hey, great. Hey, Michael, thanks for being on the show and sharing your knowledge and insights.
This is great. Thank you so much.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech Conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
All right, that rounds out today's Techstrong TV broadcast. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. Quick reminder, we've got Innotech Austin coming up next week, folks. It's happening on April 27th. That is Wednesday in Austin. And if you are interested in what we've got going on there, you can go to techstrongevents.com and click on the Innotech Austin banner to see the agenda, to see the speaker lineup, and to register for it if you are in the Austin area. We're going to be live streaming a couple of the events or a couple of the sessions from Innotech on Wednesday here on Techstrong TV, so you can take a look out for that. But definitely, if you are in the Austin area, I would encourage you to check it out because we've got chock full of goodness on Innotech Austin. We have another Innotech coming up in May 11th. This one is happening in Dallas. Certainly, if you go to Austin and you want to go over to Dallas, I'm not going to stop you. But please do check out the lineup for that event also on techstrongevents.com. We've also got lots of other events coming up that are listed on the site. So please do check out anything that might pique your interest. You can go ahead and take a look at the agenda, speaker lineup, and of course, register. That's it for me. I'll be back on Monday with a brand new Techstrong TV for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great weekend, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.